My dad told everyone I was a lazy college dropout until they saw me on the national news. My name is Elena Brooks. And if you'd asked my father 5 years ago how many children he had, he would have said just one, the successful one, the one who graduated law school, the one who made him proud. He wouldn't have mentioned me. If pressed, he might have added, "Oh, the other one. She dropped out of college. Doesn't really do much." And that would be it. That's how I existed in his world. As a quiet disappointment, an afterthought, a what could have been. The funny thing is, I never intended to be the rebel child. I wasn't reckless or wild. I didn't party. I didn't flunk out. I just stopped following a path that wasn't mine. I walked away from a life that felt scripted by someone else's ambition. And for that, I became the family disgrace. Growing up in the Brooks household was like living in a resume. My father was a former Marine turned corporate consultant. Everything in our house had a plan, a metric, a measure of success. He timed our breakfasts, scheduled our weekend bonding like boardroom meetings, and he worshipped the concept of potential. More precisely, Daniel's potential, my younger brother. Daniel was born with the Brooks glow. Perfect GPA, varsity sports, early admission to Columbia. He could do no wrong, even when he did. When he skipped curfew, it was because he was socially engaged. When I stayed up late working on a code project, I was distracted. He was the golden boy. I was the glitch. It wasn't always like that. There was a time when I was brilliant. At 8, I was building websites. At 10, I reverse engineered a school firewall for fun. At 13, I got invited to a youth tech summit, but tech wasn't part of the Brooks blueprint. Law, finance, government, that was the path. Everything else was a hobby, a phase, a distraction. So when I started drifting away from my pre-law major in college, my dad panicked. When I told him I was thinking of switching to software engineering, he said it was beneath me. When I took a leave of absence to join a startup accelerator, he stopped returning my calls. And when I dropped out entirely to work full-time on my own project, he erased me. That was the beginning of my second life, the one no one in my family asked about. I lived in a shared flat with peeling paint and unreliable plumbing. I worked night shifts at a diner to pay for server space. I pitched my app to 50 investors and got 50 rejections. I learned how to build everything from scratch, not just code, but courage. No one knew. No one cared. And that silence was louder than any insult. My mom would text sometimes. "Hope you're eating enough." Daniel would send the occasional meme, but my dad, radio silence. At Thanksgiving, my place at the table sat empty. They told the neighbors I was traveling. At church, they said I was taking time to figure things out. The truth was simpler and sadder. I was invisible. I watched my family from the outside birthdays on Instagram. Daniel's graduation streamed online. My dad's retirement party in the local paper. My name was never mentioned. Not once. I became a ghost they chose to forget. A shadow behind the golden sun. But here's the thing about shadows. They stretch farthest when the light shines brightest. I didn't stay down. I kept building, kept failing, kept learning, until one day, something shifted. But that's not this part of the story. This part 1, is about being underestimated. This part is about silence, absence, and the aching question, what does it take for your own father to see you as someone worth mentioning? If you've ever been made to feel small by your own family, if someone you love only sees your worth after the world does, if you've had to fight to be seen, then you're not alone. This is my story, and it might just be yours too. Subscribe to this channel if you've ever been underestimated by your family, your boss, or the world, and let's rewrite what success really means. Leave a comment. What's something you've achieved that no one gave you credit for? Your story matters. Let it be heard. If my father's love had a currency, it was achievement. But not just any achievement his kind. The kind that came with framed diplomas. That could be measured in SAT scores, Ivy League acceptances, and LinkedIn connections. And Daniel had all of it. He was everything I wasn't, and he never let me forget it. Not intentionally. Daniel wasn't cruel. He just existed comfortably in the spotlight, while I struggled to breathe in the dark. From the moment he could talk, Daniel had the right answers. Straight A student, captain of the debate team, interned at a senator's office in high school. He didn't need to fight for approval. It was handed to him with every gold star. And Dad. Dad beamed like Daniel was the second coming of Hamilton. He built shelves for his trophies, framed his essays, and quoted him at dinner parties. "This is my son, Daniel Prelaw at Columbia," he'd say proudly to anyone within a 10-foot radius. And when someone asked, "Do you have other children?" he'd hesitate. "Oh yes, Elena. She took a different path." That pause said more than any insult ever could. I remember one Sunday afternoon. Daniel had just gotten news that he'd been selected for a prestigious summer program in D.C. Dad called the entire family to the dining room like it was a national broadcast. He poured champagne, made a speech. Tears glistened in his eyes. And when I stood up to say congratulations, he turned to me and said, "See, Elena, that's what commitment looks like." In front of everyone, like I needed to be taught. I smiled, because that's what I'd been trained to do. But I remember walking into the garage later, curling up behind an old lawnmower, and crying silently into my knees. When Daniel visited me in college back when I still attended, he would always say the same thing. "Why don't you just stick with it? Elena, you're smart. You could be anything if you just applied yourself." I was applying myself, just not to the version of success our family worshipped. Daniel didn't see that. And maybe, in a way, I didn't either, not yet. I was still trying to validate my choice. Still hoping that if I just worked hard enough, my dad would squint and see me. But there's nothing quite like chasing approval from someone who's decided you're a disappointment. The last Thanksgiving before I left school, my father made everyone go around the table and say what they were grateful for. Daniel said he was grateful for opportunity and mentors. My mom said family. I said clarity. Dad raised an eyebrow. Clarity about what? I looked him straight in the eyes. That I need to stop pretending this is my path. The silence after that was deafening. Later that night, Daniel pulled me aside. "You really going through with this? I think I have to. You know what this'll do to Dad, right?" Maybe he'll be relieved. Daniel frowned. "You always had this chip on your shoulder, Elena, but you're not the only one with pressure. I have to be perfect all the time." I looked at him, not angry, just tired. "Then stop needing to be. Walk away." He shook his head. "Not everyone can just disappear like you." That sentence stayed with me. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. I had vanished from a life I didn't choose. And Daniel was still stuck in it. But the difference was, he was celebrated for staying. I was shamed for leaving. From that point on, I became a background character in my own family story. When Dad got promoted, Daniel was by his side. When our grandma passed, I was unable to attend even though no one asked. When Daniel graduated top of his class, I wasn't invited. They said it was to avoid tension. The real tension was in pretending I didn't exist. And still part of me hoped. I hoped Daniel would see what I was building someday. That he'd recognize the courage it took to walk away from the safety net he clung to. That maybe, just maybe, he'd stand up for me. Tell Dad, she's doing something real. She's not a dropout, she's a founder. She's changing lives. But that day never came. Not until years later. And when it did, it wasn't Daniel who spoke up. It was the world. At this point in my life, I was invisible to my family, a ghost sibling who'd vanished into the fog of poor choices. But what they didn't know was that I was about to build something they couldn't ignore. Something bigger than their silence. Bigger than Daniel's degrees. Bigger than their shame. And it all started with a broken laptop and a forgotten storage room in an abandoned public library. But I'll get to that next. I didn't drop out of college because I couldn't handle it. I dropped out because I finally realized I was surviving someone else's dream. At the time, I was in my third year majoring in political science, dragging myself through courses I didn't care about, pretending to be someone I wasn't. The only class I actually looked forward to was Digital Systems and Civic Impact, an elective that had nothing to do with my major and everything to do with my heart. That course cracked something open in me. Suddenly, I wasn't reading dense legal texts to regurgitate at debate tournaments. I was coding again, designing systems, tinkering with tech that could solve real-world problems. It was like coming home to a language I hadn't spoken in years. I spent nights buried in a borrowed laptop, building a prototype for an app that could help students in underserved schools access mentorship and online learning tools. I started skipping office hours for classes I hated and staying up until 3 a.m. on forums, learning back-end architecture. For the first time in years, I wasn't bored. I was alive. I was building, but in my family's eyes, what I was building didn't count. Because it wasn't a resume item. It wasn't impressive at cocktail parties. It didn't fit the Brooks model of success. I knew the conversation with my dad was coming. I just didn't expect it to feel like war. I called him one afternoon, voice shaking but rehearsed. "Dad, I want to talk to you about school." He sighed the kind of sigh that said, "Here we go again. Don't tell me you're changing majors again." "No, I'm leaving." The pause that followed was long enough to build a lifetime of silence. "You're what?" "I'm withdrawing. Taking a leave. Maybe permanently." He didn't yell. That was worse. His voice dropped cold. Surgical. "What for?" "I've been developing a platform. An app." He cut in. "You're dropping out of college to make an app?" "It's more than that. No, it's not more than that." Then he said the line I'll never forget. "You're throwing your future away to play with toys." I tried to explain, tried to tell him about the mentors I'd met, the accelerator that wanted me to pitch, the grants I was applying for, but he wasn't hearing any of it. To him, I wasn't taking a risk. I was confirming a fear. I wasn't his daughter who dared to be different. I was the lazy one who gave up. "You'll regret this," he said. And then he hung up. He didn't ask where I was going. He didn't ask if I needed help. He didn't say goodbye. I withdrew from school the next day, packed what little I had, closed the door on the dorm room I'd decorated with quotes about justice and reform. Justice was never going to come from a lecture hall. It would come from me if I built it. I moved into a basement apartment with peeling paint and no central heat. Got a job bussing tables at a greasy diner that smelled like burnt hash browns and broken dreams. Worked night shifts. Then came home to code until my fingers cramped. I bought secondhand monitors, stacked them on milk crates, used old textbooks to prop up my router, survived on coffee and frozen noodles. And every time I opened my inbox and saw another rejection from an investor or a grant program, I'd whisper to myself, "They don't see it yet, but one day, they will." My mom called once. A few weeks in, "Your father's not taking this well," she said quietly. I didn't know what to say. Was I supposed to apologize for trying to live a life I believed in? I'm not asking for his approval. I finally said, "Just some space." "Well, he's telling people you're taking a gap year." I laughed bitterly. "Tell him whatever makes him sleep better at night." He didn't call me, didn't email, didn't ask if I was alive. And that silence, that deliberate silence, was louder than any door slamming. Daniel texted me once, during midterms. "Dad says you've gone off the deep end. You okay?" I stared at the message for a long time. Typed, "I'm better than okay." Then deleted it. Typed, "Yeah, just focused on a project." He never replied. There's a specific kind of loneliness that comes from choosing yourself when no one else will. It's heavy. It's hollow. But it's also freeing. Because once you've been erased by the people who were supposed to know you best, you stop needing their permission to exist. You start building for you. Not for applause. Not for approval. Just to prove you were never the problem. My project, then nameless, broken, buggy, was my salvation. I didn't know it yet. But in that cracked screen and flickering code, I was planting the seeds of something that would change lives. Just not yet. First, I had to lose everything I thought I was supposed to be, to become who I really was. No dramatic goodbyes. No angry packing. No cinematic slamming of the door. When I left my old life behind, I left quietly. All I had was a beat-up duffel bag, a worn laptop with missing keys, and a spiral notebook filled with diagrams no one had ever read. No one helped me move. No one asked where I was going. And I didn't volunteer the answer. It was easier that way. If no one saw me leave, maybe it would hurt less that no one asked me to stay. The apartment I found was barely that. It was technically legal just under 300 square feet, with paper-thin walls, a faulty radiator, and a bathroom door that didn't quite close all the way. The kitchen was a single electric burner and a stained sink. The mattress was on the floor. The windows didn't lock, but it had one thing I needed: silence. And Wi-Fi I could borrow from the tattoo shop downstairs. It was perfect. My first night there, I sat on the floor eating instant noodles straight from the pot. Steam fogged up my glasses as I scrolled through my code, debugging line after line in near darkness. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere distant. A dog barked. The pipes groaned like old ghosts. I didn't feel brave. I didn't feel defiant. I felt scared. And, strangely, free. Because for the first time in years, no one was watching me fail. I got a job bussing tables at a 24-hour diner 3 blocks away. The manager didn't care about my resume, just that I showed up and didn't complain about the night shift. I worked from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., wearing a uniform that always smelled faintly of bleach and fried oil. The money barely covered rent and groceries, but I made it stretch. After work, I'd walk home in the dark, change into sweatpants, heat up coffee, and start working on my prototype. I called it Lightbridge, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe because I wanted it to be something that connected people to opportunity. Maybe because I was desperate to build something that mattered, even if no one saw it. Lightbridge was rough. The UI looked like something from 2002. The backend was fragile, stitched together from open-source libraries, duct tape, and stubborn optimism, but it worked, sort of. I coded until sunrise, napped for a few hours, and repeated the cycle. No social life, no dates, no distractions, just the hum of my old laptop, the glow of the screen, and the constant whisper in my mind. Make something they can't ignore. I applied for grants, accelerators, competitions. Most of them didn't respond. Some did to reject me. One rejection read, "This idea lacks market viability. You should focus on finishing your education." I laughed when I read that one. Then I cried. Then I went back to work. My first real break came not from an investor, but from a librarian. I was working from the back corner of a public library on my day off. My laptop had overheated again, and I was muttering under my breath, trying to save a corrupted file. A woman in her 60s approached, holding a mug with Reader's Rule written in glittery Sharpie. "Rough day?" she asked. I nodded. "Just losing 2 weeks of work. That's all." She peered at my screen. "That looks impressive. What is it?" I hesitated. "It's an education platform for students in underfunded schools." She smiled. "Well, that sounds like something the world needs." Her name was Sharon. She ran a youth reading program barely funded, always understaffed. She asked if I'd be willing to pilot Lightbridge with 5 students. "Just see what happens," she said. "Worst case, you wasted a Saturday. Best case, you change a life." That Saturday, I sat in a dusty community room with 5 middle schoolers and a projector that barely worked. They were loud, distracted, not exactly impressed. But then, something clicked. One kid, Anthony, figured out how to navigate the math module. Another found the mentorship chat and sent me a question: "Is college worth it?" A third built a study schedule using one of the planner tools I'd buried 3 menus deep. By the end of the session, they were asking when I'd be back. Sharon pulled me aside and said, "Elena, I don't know what you're doing, but it's working." That was the first time in a long time someone looked at me and saw value. Not potential, not a project, just me building something that made sense. That helped. It was like someone turned on a light I hadn't realized had gone out. I left that library feeling something I hadn't in years. Purpose. Not the kind that gets framed on a wall, but the kind that gets 5 kids to stay an extra hour because they want to learn. And for me, that was enough to keep going. I still wasn't making money, still living off tips and caffeine, still invisible to my family. But Lightbridge was no longer just a prototype. It was being used. It was helping. And that meant something. Maybe everything. People talk about momentum like it's a wave. You catch it, ride it, and everything takes off. But in real life, momentum feels more like crawling up a muddy hill. You slip, You get rained on. Sometimes you don't even realize you've moved at all. That was me. After the pilot at the library, I didn't go viral. I didn't get funded. No one reached out with a check or a contract. But I had 5 kids who kept asking for more. So I kept building. I tweaked the interface, added modules for reading comprehension, improved the mentorship chat. I printed flyers at a 24-hour copy shop and handed them out to local schools, youth centers, even laundromats. Most of them ended up in trash bins. A few stuck. I started getting emails: a teacher in Detroit, a volunteer in Arizona, a homeschooling mom in Kansas. They all said the same thing. We don't have much, but we'd love to try your tool. So I gave it away. No contracts, no sign-ups, just a link and a hope. Money was still a problem. I lived on rice, instant noodles, and whatever the diner let me take home. The laptop I coded on had a cracked screen and a battery that lasted 11 minutes. My server bill was overdue. I once skipped buying groceries so I could pay for cloud hosting. I ate dry cereal for 3 days. No milk. And still, I kept going. Because even if the world didn't know I existed, there were kids logging in every day, asking questions, learning, trying. That was enough. Until the night the server crashed. It was 3:30 I was reviewing a new batch of updates when the dashboard went dark. No warnings, no errors, just gone. I refreshed. Nothing. Tried again. Still nothing. I checked the logs. Corrupted. Database unrecoverable. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, hands trembling. 2 years of work gone. Thousands of lines of code. Every account, every user, every message. Wiped. I don't remember getting to the floor. One moment I was at my desk. The next, I was curled up in the corner, rocking back and forth like a child. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just sat there, hollowed out. The silence was so loud it felt like it was screaming. Everything I had left behind: my degree, my family, my future. I had bet it all on this one fragile thing, and it had shattered. The next morning, I went to the diner for my shift. Didn't speak, didn't eat, just moved through the motions. At the end of the shift, Sharon, the librarian, showed up. She looked at me for 2 seconds and said, "You haven't slept." I nodded. She sat down. I had 5 students walk in this morning and ask why the app wasn't working. I swallowed hard. I lost everything. The server's dead. I can't afford recovery tools. She reached into her bag and pulled out a wrinkled envelope. Inside was $300 in small bills. "Don't ask where I got it," she said. "Just fix it." I cried then, not for the money, but for the gesture, for someone believing in me enough to help when it didn't benefit them at all. I used that money to buy a new drive. Stayed up 48 hours straight rebuilding from backups I didn't know I had. And slowly, painfully, the app came back online. Not perfect, not polished, but breathing. A week later, I received an email. Subject: "Congratulations, you've been selected." It was from a micro-grant foundation that funded early-stage education projects. I'd applied 6 months ago and forgotten about it. They were giving me $5. 00, no strings attached. It felt like $1 million. I paid off my server bill, bought a refurbished laptop, replaced the cracked screen. I even bought real groceries: fruit, vegetables, things that didn't come in foil packets. That month, I onboarded 20 new student groups across 4 states. I wrote every line of code myself, answered every support email, trained every mentor volunteer via Zoom. No one saw it. No cameras, no press releases, no standing ovations. Just me, in that same tiny apartment, making quiet progress that no one cared about, except the people who needed it most. And I was okay with that, because even in anonymity, I felt more real than I ever had at the dinner table in my father's house. I wasn't just someone's daughter. I wasn't someone's dropout sister. I wasn't a mistake. I was a builder, a teacher, a bridge. And that bridge was holding, even if no one from my old life ever walked across it. Yet, it started with a reporter, not a famous one, not someone with millions of followers or a primetime slot. Just a young journalist from a local education blog, someone named Maya Lin, who emailed me on a Thursday afternoon. Her message was short. "Hi, Elena. I run a small blog focused on grassroots education. A librarian in your city mentioned your app. Would you be open to a short interview? I almost deleted it. I wasn't ready. Lightbridge wasn't ready. I didn't have a brand, a PR team, or even a functioning about page. But Sharon had referred her, and Sharon had believed in me when no one else did. So I said yes. We met at a park near the library. I wore my cleanest shirt and brought my laptop in case Maya wanted a demo. She didn't ask technical questions. She asked human ones. What made you build this? What was the hardest part? What kept you going? I answered honestly, not eloquently, just honestly. I told her about the students who logged in at midnight, the single mother who used the planner tool to organize her daughter's schedule, the kid in Mississippi who sent me a message that read, "This is the first time I feel like I'm not stupid." I didn't expect much. She said it would be published in a few days. I went back to work like nothing had happened. 3 days later, the article dropped. The dropout who built a classroom in the cloud. It was raw, compassionate, and surprisingly powerful. No flashy graphics, no exaggeration. Just my story, laid out with care and truth. That night, my inbox exploded. Not with donations, not with investors, but with people, real people. Parents, teachers, volunteers, other nobodies who had built something in silence and suddenly felt seen. The article got picked up by a bigger site, then syndicated. Suddenly, Lightbridge had traffic. Real traffic. Too much traffic. The server crashed. Again. But this time, when I posted about it, someone reached out. An engineer from a mid-sized cloud infrastructure firm. "I read your story," she wrote. "You need better hosting. We can help pro bono." And just like that, we moved from duct tape to professional-grade architecture. The growth wasn't explosive, but it was steady. We went from 50 active users to 500, then 1, 200, then 3. Sozan. All organic, all word of mouth. I stayed in my apartment. Didn't upgrade anything. Didn't hire yet. Every dollar went into better servers, accessibility updates, and a new mentor matching algorithm. It felt unreal. And then, a name appeared in my inbox that pulled the air from my lungs. Jonathan Brooks, my father. No subject line, just, I saw the article, that was it. No apology, no question. Just 5 words that felt like a storm cloud gathering on the horizon. I didn't reply, not for 2 days. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't know how to answer. What do you say to someone who erased you and now wants to write you back in? Eventually, I wrote, "I'm glad you read it." He replied within 5 minutes. "Can we talk?" I stared at those 3 words for a long time. Long enough for my coffee to go cold. Long enough to feel like the scared version of myself I thought I'd outgrown. I didn't owe him anything, but part of me wanted to hear what he had to say, even if it hurt, even if it was too late. I said yes. We met at the diner where I used to bus tables. I don't know why I picked that place. Maybe to remind myself of how far I'd come. Maybe to ground myself in the version of me that survived the worst parts of this journey. He looked smaller than I remembered. Older, like someone who'd been carrying a quiet regret that no one else could see. He didn't order anything. Just sat there holding the menu like a shield. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "I didn't know. I didn't respond. I didn't want to know." He corrected. "That's probably more honest." There was a long pause. Then he said, "I told everyone you were wasting your life, that you'd ruined your future. And now I find out you've built something that's helping kids, that's being talked about around the country. I don't know what to do with that." I looked at him for a long time, then said quietly, "You could start by not calling me a dropout." He flinched, and then nodded. "Fair." We didn't hug, didn't cry. This wasn't a movie. This was 2 people standing at opposite ends of a broken bridge, wondering if they could start rebuilding. "Before we left," he said. I read the comments under the article. The one from the student in Georgia. And the teacher in Arizona. "You did that." I shrugged. "I didn't do it for recognition." "I know," he said. "That's what makes it worse." Then he added, "I'm proud of you. I just didn't realize it until other people told me I should be." And in that moment, more than sadness, More than anger. What I felt most was tired. So very tired of waiting to be seen. The early Lightbridge version wasn't pretty. It crashed every other day. The UI looked like it was built in 2003. But it worked. One student turned into 20, then 100, then 1,000, all logging in, all staying. They didn't care about how it looked. They cared that someone, somewhere, had finally built something for them. I wasn't earning money. I was earning something better. Trust. One night, I got an email from a public librarian in rural Michigan. "We're using your platform to tutor kids who can't afford test prep." One of them asked if Elena was a real person. I told him yes, and that you were once a kid like him. I read it 3 times, sitting on a plastic chair in a laundromat, waiting for my clothes to dry. And I cried. Not because I was sad, but because someone had said what I didn't even know I needed. "You're real." I started keeping a folder titled "When It Hurts." Read this. It held screenshots of messages like that one. A kid in Thailand who stayed up until 2 a.m. to finish a coding project using Lightbridge. A girl in the Bronx who built her first resume on the platform and landed an internship. I didn't have a team, just me. But for the first time, it didn't feel like I was building alone. One morning, I woke up to a donation $300 from someone named Sharon. I didn't recognize the name. The note said, "This helped my son get his confidence back. Please keep going." It wasn't just money. It was permission. To believe I wasn't foolish. To believe I wasn't wasting my time. To believe maybe this was working. That week, I used the funds to upgrade our server space and to buy a sandwich. A real sandwich, not instant noodles. It was the first meal in months that didn't taste like survival. It tasted like momentum. And I swore, right then, if I ever make it out of this stage, I will never forget who I was when it almost broke me. I never expected to be invited to speak at anything, let alone a local education summit. But a few months after Lightbridge crossed 10,000 active users, I got an email from the Detroit Public Library. "We're hosting a youth education forum. We'd love for you to share your journey." It wasn't the UN. It wasn't even on YouTube. But it was a stage. And for me, it felt enormous. The night before the event, I couldn't sleep. I practiced my talk in front of a cracked mirror, wrote and rewrote my intro 5 times. "Hi, I'm Elena. I build tech that listens to kids who've been ignored." Too bold. "I'm Elena Brooks, and I started Lightbridge after realizing no one else would." Too bitter. I finally settled on, "I'm Elena. I dropped out of college to build something I couldn't find in it." True, simple, unapologetic. The room wasn't full, maybe 30 people. Some teachers, some students, a couple of reporters in the back. I started shaky, hands trembling. But I told the story. Not the polished version, not the success story. The real one. The ramen, the loneliness, the late nights, the $300 donation that kept the lights on. And then I said something I hadn't written down. If you feel like no one sees you build something anyway, not to get noticed, but because someone else like you might need it. When I finished, the room was silent. Then a student stood up. A girl, maybe 17. "How do you keep going when your own family thinks you're wasting your life?" I didn't give her advice. I gave her honesty. You build anyway, and you let the work speak louder than the silence. That line, someone must have quoted it, because the next morning, it was on Twitter. Let the work speak louder than the silence. Underneath, 800 retweets, and an email in my inbox. "Elena, would you consider speaking at the Global Education Forum next spring?" I blinked. Then read it again. The sender, the United Nations. I had never spoken in front of that many people before. The main hall at the Global Education Forum in Geneva felt more like a concert venue than a conference room. Except the music here wasn't sound. It was ideas. I stood behind the curtain, clutching a printed copy of my speech. My finger pressed against the edge of the page, an old habit to stay calm when I felt like I might fall apart. The host's voice echoed across the room. "And now, please welcome our next speaker, Elena Brooks, founder of Lightbridge." Applause, not explosive, but warm, rising like a tide. I stepped into the light. I couldn't see anyone clearly, just the silhouettes of hundreds of people waiting to listen. To me, I didn't read word for word. I told stories about the boy in Detroit who messaged me at 2 a.m. I don't have anyone to ask questions to. Your app feels like the first teacher who ever listens. About the library floor where I once fell asleep trying to restore a dead server. About Sharon the librarian who handed me $300 in crumpled bills and said, "Just fix it." I told those stories, like I was speaking to the people who had never asked. Like I was rewriting all the questions my family never thought to pose. At the end, I paused. I took a breath. I looked out into the shadows of faces and said, I used to be the forgotten name in my own family. Not because they were cruel, but because they didn't understand anything that wasn't on the map they'd drawn. But if you're hearing me now, please remember this. Some of the most valuable paths are not listed on college brochures. Some of the most impactful builders don't hold degrees. And some of us, like me, maybe like you, are worth listening to, even when we don't come with credentials. Then I closed with this line. I wasn't lost. I just wasn't where they expected me to be. There was a beat of silence. Then the applause rose. Steady, strong. A standing ovation not for a title or a logo, aura résumé, but for the truth. That night, in a quiet hotel room near Lake Geneva, I received a message from my mother. Your father didn't take his eyes off the screen. When you said, I wasn't lost. He turned to me and whispered, she was never lost. We were the ones without a map. So, I set my phone on my chest and lay in silence. It felt like something deep inside me, something I had carried since I was 20, finally exhaled. The next day, I flew home. Not a celebrity, not a hero, just me, a woman who had finally been heard and no longer needed to scream to exist. After the speech in Geneva, I didn't open social media for 72 hours. No email, no news alerts, no checking views or mentions or messages. Not because I was afraid something bad would happen, but because, for the first time in years, I wanted to feel this moment quietly, not document it, not perform it, just live inside it. I left the conference with nothing flashy, just a name badge, a USB with my recorded talk, and a small business card from the Director of Global Education Initiatives. Call me when you're ready. We'd love to support the next chapter of Lightbridge. I slipped it into my wallet, between a diner receipt and an expired coupon. Not because I didn't value it, but because I wanted to stay grounded. A little while longer. By the time I landed back in the U.S., everything had changed. Maya, the journalist who first wrote about me, had sent a single text. CNN aired your speech. Twice. You're not invisible anymore. I smiled. A tired, small smile. Because invisibility had once been my armor, now being seen felt like exposure. And yet, I didn't want to go back. I turned on my phone. Hundreds of unread messages flooded in, from old classmates, professors who once told me I was too distracted, people I hadn't heard from since my freshman year. Is this the same Elena from Poli-Sci 204? Just watched your UN talk, chills. Wow. You proved everyone wrong. And buried in all of that, a message from Daniel. Your speech. I don't have the words. I cried. We all watched it, me. Mom. Dad. He turned off his phone, didn't speak during the whole thing. And when it ended, he looked at the screen and said, she's gone further than I ever imagined, further than I ever mapped. I stared at that message for a long time, not because it shocked me, but because finally, I didn't need it. The next day, I was invited onto a morning talk show, not as a product to promote, not for a launch, just a conversation about the journey. The host leaned in and asked, do you consider yourself successful now? I paused. Then I said, I think success is when you can finally see yourself even if no one else ever had. And even when they do see you, you no longer need them to. The room went still, not for drama, but because sometimes the simplest truth hits the hardest. That evening, I came home, tired, quiet. On the kitchen counter was an unmarked envelope. No name, no return address. Inside was a photograph. Me, age 7, sitting at our family's old desktop computer. in a Hello Kitty t-shirt, typing a string of code, standing behind me, hand on my shoulder. Was my father, smiling, on the back, in his handwriting, 6 words. I was proud then, even more now. I sat down on the floor and held the photo. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I just felt full. Not because this erased the years of silence, not because it fixed everything, but because I no longer had to write my story by myself. It started with an email from the university I dropped out of. Subject: Invitation to speak at Commencement 2026. I thought it was a mistake. I stared at the subject line, blinking, read it, closed it, reopened it. It wasn't spam. It wasn't a prank. It was from the Dean of Students himself. Your story has reached far beyond this campus. We'd be honored to have you address our graduating class. Many of them already know who you are. Some say your story gave them permission to choose their own path. I sat there, frozen. This was the same institution that, 5 years ago, had let me walk away without a single question. No one stopped me. No one asked what I was building. No one called to say, "We believe in you." But now, they wanted to hand me a microphone and a stage with my name engraved on the program. I didn't say yes right away, not because I was angry, but because I needed time to ask myself, was I ready to go back? Not physically, emotionally. Was I ready to step into a space that had once whispered, "You don't belong here"? After a week, I answered, yes. Not for them, for me. The day I arrived, the campus looked the same. Red brick, wide quads, students on skateboards, coffee in hand, deadlines in mind. But everything felt different. Not because it changed, but because I passed by the building where I'd taken my last class, where I'd once sat in the back row, half listening to lectures on international systems, while secretly drawing wireframes for my prototype on the margins of my notebook. I walked into the auditorium where I'd once listened to other people's ideas. This time, there was a sign by the entrance. Keynote: Elena Brooks, founder of Lightbridge. I stopped and stared. For a long time, I had imagined this moment, but always with a different name on the banner. Backstage. The staff was kind. Too kind. They offered me water, notes, tissues. The event coordinator, a woman named Jo, said quietly, "I was in your cohort. I remember when you left. I always wondered where you went." I looked at her. Not far. Just off the map. She smiled. "Now the map has your name on it." When I stepped out onto the stage, the auditorium was full, not just with graduates, but parents, professors, trustees, the same professors who had once written me off, the same deans who had signed my withdrawal form, the same classrooms that had never quite known what to do with me. They were all listening now, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. I just spoke. 5 years ago, I left this campus thinking I had failed. But what I've come to understand is this: some of us are not built for perfect grades or pre-written paths. Some of us are not designed to fit inside a classroom. Some of us are meant to build the classrooms that didn't exist yet. You don't need a diploma to matter. But if you have one, use it. Not as a ticket to status, but as a promise. To question, to create, to reach back and lift someone else. The future doesn't need more titles. It needs more courage. There was no thunderous applause, just a slow, rising sound, like a wave returning to the shore. It was enough. After the ceremony, I stood alone for a while in the courtyard. A student came up, maybe 22, eyes wide. "I watched your Geneva talk 3 times. It made me switch majors. My dad still isn't speaking to me, but I know I made the right call." I nodded. "Steady. It'll take time, but you're not alone. You're just early." He smiled and left. And I stood there thinking, maybe that's what this has all been for. Not the applause, not the redemption arc, not the full circle headlines, but this moment between one person who had been erased and another just beginning to exist. A few weeks after the university commencement, I received a message through the Lightbridge contact form. Not my direct email, not a personal outreach, just a quiet little message buried between student feedback and bug reports. Subject: Confidential invitation. Global Education and Innovation Coalition. The sender, a senior advisor for the World Economic Council's Education Division. Elena, your recent work and perspective align with a new initiative we're developing, an international coalition to reform learning infrastructure in under-resourced regions. We're assembling a founding advisory group. We believe your voice is not only valuable, it's essential. There's a roundtable in Brussels next month. Would you consider joining us? At the bottom of the email, I saw the list of invitees: PhDs, ministers, education policy architects, former secretaries of state, and then me. For a moment, I just sat there, in the same kitchen chair I'd written my first line of code from, wearing a hoodie that still smelled like server room coffee. No camera, no applause, just me. And a door that had never been open was now asking me to walk through. A month later, I landed in Brussels. The hotel was 5 stars. The conference center smelled like polished wood and polite ambition. The name tags were gold-etched. The tables curved in a U-shape, carefully designed for inclusion, but built by people who'd never had to fight to be heard. I took my seat, near the end, not because it was assigned, but because muscle memory still said, "Stay small, don't take up space." But then I looked at my placard. Elena Brooks, Lightbridge, founder, executive director. No asterisk, no apology. So I sat up straighter. Introductions began. One by one, each person shared their name, country, credentials. Then it came to the man directly across from me. Gray hair, navy suit, posture like a permanent shrug of authority. Jonathan Langley, he said, education development strategist, formerly with Brooks and Wallace. I felt the air shift. Brooks and Wallace, the firm where my father had worked for 2 decades. The name on every plaque and paper in my childhood home. The man across from me had once shared an office with my father. They'd built their careers on developing education ecosystems. But I had never once heard either of them talk about students. Only systems, only control. Now we sat across from each other as equals, at least on paper. When my turn came, I spoke simply. Elena Brooks, founder of Lightbridge, an open-access education platform for underserved students. My background is non-traditional. I left college early to build what I couldn't find inside the system. And I'm here because those who don't fit in the room often understand what the room keeps getting wrong. There was a pause. Then someone 2 seats over, a representative from Kenya, nodded slowly. Yes, that's why she should be here. Langley didn't speak, but he looked at me with the kind of squint you reserve for people you're not sure how to categorize. I met his eyes, then broke contact. Not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't interested in being understood by those who never tried. Later, during a breakout session, we were paired. Langley opened with, "I worked with your father." I nodded. "I know." He hesitated. "He used to talk about you, said you were the smart one, just too stubborn to follow direction." I smiled. He wasn't wrong, but sometimes stubborn girls build things that obedient men only ever fund. He raised his eyebrows. Then, for the first time, he smiled too. "I underestimated you." "That's how most of this started," I replied. That evening, back at the hotel, I ordered room service. Just a bowl of lentil soup and flatbread, not out of frugality, but tradition. The same thing I ate the night I got my first $300 donation from Sharon. Before I slept, I opened my laptop and added 3 new schools to Lightbridge's onboarding queue. One in Jordan, one in Brazil, one in northern Alaska. I was now sitting at a global table, but my real work was still with the students who couldn't afford the room. And I would never forget that. 3 weeks after Brussels, I received a call from a VC firm in San Francisco. Not just any firm, Red Spire Capital. The same firm that once ghosted my cold email in 2019. The same one that said Lightbridge was too idealistic for sustainable returns. Now they wanted a meeting. "We've been following your growth, Elena. What you've built? It's rare. And we'd like to talk about scaling." Scaling. The golden word. The word that used to keep me awake at 3 a.m., sketching diagrams on pizza boxes. while the world scrolled past me. We met on the 31st floor of a glass and chrome tower. The kind of office with kombucha on tap and interns who say impact like it's a KPI. There were 3 partners in the room, each wearing sneakers more expensive than my monthly burn rate. One of them, Jenna, the managing partner, leaned in with the pitch. Elena, we want to offer you $12 million Series A. You'd maintain 49% ownership. We bring in our own product lead, scale your engineering team, and shift the Lightbridge model to freemium. I blinked. Freemium? Yeah, basic access remains free, but test prep, career tools, AI tutor add-ons, pay wallet. It's clean, proven, scalable. I looked down at my hands. These were the same hands that had typed out the first version of Lightbridge in a borrowed library account. The same hands that soldered a second-hand server together when our host went dark. I cleared my throat. So, the poorest students, the ones who need it most, they get less. Jenna smiled like a teacher correcting a slow student. They get enough. And with revenue, you can eventually help more. Eventually was a word I'd learned to fear. It always came at the cost of now. I asked for 48 hours to think. Back in my apartment, I stood in the shower for almost an hour, just letting the water hit my shoulders, while I weighed the decision that could change everything. $12 million. Global reach. Real salaries for my burned-out team. Real stability. But at what cost? I called Sharon that night. She was retired now, living in Arizona with her cats and her old typewriter. I told her everything. There was a long pause. Then she said, "If you take their money, will the kids who wrote you at 2 a.m. still feel like Lightbridge is for them?" Silence. "Elena," she said gently, "you've already built something the world respects. Don't trade being trusted for being trending." The next morning, I declined the offer. Politely. Firmly. Jenna didn't respond. The team sent a one-line reply. "We hope you find what you're looking for." I already had. But I won't lie. There were days after that where doubt crept in like floodwater. When a server crashed and I couldn't afford redundancy. When a nonprofit deal fell through because I wasn't big enough. When I saw former classmates featured in Forbes. And I was still rationing cloud credits. But I held the line, because I'd rather be small and honest than big and empty. 2 weeks later, something unexpected happened. I received an anonymous donation through our platform. $100. Do another. No message. No signature. Just one line on the receipt. For staying stubborn. For staying true. I never found out who sent it. But I didn't need to. Because for the first time, I understood something my father never did. Not every empire is built with money. Some are built with refusal. It came in the mail. Not an email. Not a text. Not even a call. A formal, cream-colored envelope. Handwritten in my father's precise cursive. My full name on the front. Elena Grace Brooks. Inside. A card for my cousin Taylor's wedding. Location. Boston. Black tie. Reception to follow. And one line, added at the bottom in pen. Would be good to see you there, Dad. No love. No miss you. Just an obligation disguised as an olive branch. I read it 5 times before placing it face down on the counter. I hadn't seen my father in 3 years. Not since he called me ungrateful. After I declined the job offer at his firm, a position he thought would fix my resume. Not since I told him Lightbridge had passed 100 COSO users. And he replied, "Yeah, but when are you going to get a real title?" Now, after all the silence, he wanted to see me. At a wedding, like nothing had happened. I debated for days. My therapist said, "Elena, you don't owe anyone a performance." My mother texted, "I think it would mean a lot to him, but I'll support whatever you choose." And Daniel, my brother, just said, "If you go as who you are now, not the girl he boxed into silence." So I went. Not for him. Not even for family. I went because I wanted to walk into that room. As the version of myself that survived it. The church was immaculate. Marble aisles. Peonies in tall glass vases. I wore a sleek navy dress. No labels. No sparkle. Just quiet strength. As I walked through the crowd, heads turned. People recognized me. Some from the Geneva speech. Others from the CNN feature. A few from whispers passed between family members over the years. I smiled politely, no small talk, and then I saw him, my father, standing by the pews, still tall, still composed, hair a little thinner, but that same unreadable expression. He looked at me, hesitated, and then nodded. Elena, Dad, we didn't hug. We didn't need to pretend. The ceremony passed in a blur. Afterward, at the reception, while everyone danced and laughed and drank champagne, he came to stand beside me at the bar. You look good. I am good. A beat. I saw your Brussels panel. You held your own. I built my own, I corrected. He chuckled softly, still sharp. Then, quieter. I didn't get it before. What you were doing. I thought you were throwing things away. Now I see. You were just refusing to take what wasn't yours. I said nothing, because part of me wanted more. An apology, a reckoning, the truth. But part of me, the wiser part, knew this was as much as he could give. And maybe that was okay. As I turned to leave, he stopped me. Your mother said you didn't need our approval anymore. I looked him in the eye. I never did. I just wanted your belief. He looked down, and for once, didn't try to reply. That night, I walked out of the reception alone. No dramatic goodbyes, no need for closure, because closure didn't come from them. It came from standing in the very room that once made you feel invisible, and realizing you've outgrown every corner of it. It came in the middle of a Tuesday, no special occasion, no milestone, just another day filled with emails, updates, and code reviews. Subject line: faculty invitation visiting lecturer, innovation in education, from Dr. Anna Tran, Dean of Curriculum, Department of Global Studies, Cambridge Hill University. Yes, the same university I dropped out of. The email was formal, but the message was clear. We've been following your work since your UN address. Your contributions to educational accessibility are not only innovative, they're transformative. We're building a new cross-disciplinary course on reimagining systems through social technology, and we'd be honored to have you design and teach it. Not just as a speaker, as a co-creator. I read it twice. Then again, I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I just sat still, because this was the moment. The full circle. The moment you imagine in a coffee shop 5 years ago, when you feel like a ghost on your own campus, when your professors don't remember your name, when you leave without a degree, and wonder if you'll ever belong anywhere again. I didn't say yes right away, not because I doubted myself, but because I wanted to answer as Elena now, not the dropout, not the girl in the back row, but the woman who had built Lightbridge from borrowed code and silent rage. We scheduled a call. Dean Tran greeted me warmly. There was no condescension, no performance, just, you changed the conversation. We'd like to give you a space to keep doing that this time. With a whiteboard, I asked questions, lots of them. Who gets to enroll? What voices are centered? Can we build this for students who don't just want credentials, but clarity? She said, not only can we must. So I said yes. The first day I stepped back onto that campus, I walked into the classroom alone. No assistant, no press, no parent whispering, "We're so proud." Just me. Room 207. Same building I once failed my economics midterm in E. But now, my name was on the syllabus, redesigning the system. Education, equity, and the future we choose. On the first day, I opened with this. You don't need a perfect resume to have something worth saying. You don't need a title to ask the right questions. And sometimes, the most important thing you'll ever learn in a classroom is that it can't contain you. The students were silent, but not because they didn't care. Because for once, someone wasn't telling them what to become. Someone was showing them how to build what doesn't exist yet. After class, one student stayed behind. She looked nervous, eyes flicking between her notebook and me. Professor Brooks, can I ask something? Of course. Did it ever feel like the world didn't want you to matter? I nodded, every day, until I stopped asking for permission. That night, I walked home under the soft fall air. I passed the same coffee shop where I once cried over an empty bank account and a failed pitch deck. Now it had a flyer taped to the window. Elena Brooks. Lecture series free for students. All students. I smiled. Not because I had made it, but because I had stayed true, because the girl they said wouldn't finish anything built something no one could take away. Not even now. And maybe that's the real story. Not about revenge. Not about being proven right. Not about applause. But about becoming the kind of person who no longer needs validation to know who she is. My dad told everyone I was a lazy college dropout until they saw me on national news. But by then, I didn't need to be seen. I had already built the future with my own hands. Each episode is a slow burn of suspicion, sorrow, and strength. And when justice finally comes, it doesn't knock, it shatters. Are you ready to listen to the next voices that were silenced? Subscribe now to step into tales where the wounds are real, the pain is raw, and the revenge is unforgettable.